Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, to wherever you are and whatever time of the day it is when you get into this video. Hey man, want it back in the ring. That's what the people are saying. After watching Lamont Roach fight last night, Pitbull Cruz fight last night, and Frank Martin, who damn near killed Francis Barthélemy, right? The fans are talking, and they want Tank back in the ring. But this is the thing, not many fans really respected Gervonta Davis, man. You know what I'm saying? And Gervonta Davis is taking a stance where he just doesn't care what anybody has to say. Gervonta Davis was on Twitter today telling a fan, F you. You know what I'm saying? You're like, F y'all fans. So Gervonta doesn't care what fans want. But the boxing world watched 3 of Gervonta's former opponents scrap last night: Roach, Pitbull, and Frank Martin. And they delivered major performances that shocked, that impressed, and reminded fans of something they've long overlooked, is that, Gervonta Davis has been that good and that guy. So it's kind of wild to see that fans who doubted him and doubted his resume are out here like, we need Tank back in the ring. Because now Tank doesn't want anybody's respect. Tank doesn't give a shit. I'm telling you, he doesn't care. So I think I'm trying to just examine how fans flipped, why Tank feels disrespected, and how last night's event seemed to have changed the narrative surrounding his entire career. So it's just amazing. I was out running today. I ran for about an hour. I went live for 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes. Then I ended the live and I finished running. And I was talking to a buddy of mine and he was like, you see what people are saying on Twitter? I'm like, no, I don't be on social media like most of you. And he was like, it seems like the boxing world woke up today with a completely different level of respect for Gervonta Davis. And I was like, well, the irony is that Tank himself doesn't want it anymore. And I was telling him, I was like, after watching 3 of his former opponents, Lamont Roach, Pitbull, Cruz, and Frank Martin, and the way they performed last night, I mean, they stole the show. I said, fans are now realizing just how good Tank's wins truly were. And I think that's what happened. And the conversations happening across Twitter, YouTube, and different forums, they're all pointing to one surprising direction. Fans are I think they're finally understanding Tank's skill, his timing, quality of opposition, and his power. Something they refused to acknowledge when those fights originally happened. But there are some who acknowledge those things. They just want to see him fight Devin Haney. They want to see him fight Shakir. They want to see him make the best fights possible. And I can understand that. But at the same time, I think last night served as a reality check for a lot of people. It reminded people that it's easy to devalue a fighter while he's active. But once time passes and his former opponents show improvement, show dominance, or show new layers to their game, or maybe they're showing what they already had, they just couldn't show it against Tank. But all of a sudden, Tank's resume starts looking a little bit different. Lamont Roach, Cruz, Martin, they weren't seen as elite by the mainstream when they first fought Tank. Matter of fact, all 3 had question marks attached to their names. Roach was seen as, kind of basic and limited, unknown. True boxing fans knew he had more talent than that, but people were just like, who's this guy? They pull a Conor McGregor. Who the fuck is this guy? And Pitbull was just seen as a brawler, no real threat, just come forward, explosive, but someone that Tank could easily outbox. Frank Martin was just seen as somebody who was just, Earl Spence's protege, and somebody who was more of a C-plus level fighter who started boxing late. They knew he was athletic, had a little bit of talent, but he was untested at the highest level, and no one gave him a chance against Tank. But you see, last night, each of them performed in a way that made fans rethink the entire timeline of Tank's career and how many fighters he's been prematurely judged on. Look at Lamont Roach. Did he deserve that win against Tank? Yes. All right. But let's just take him for example. Okay, I just want to get that out there so y'all understand. Based on the rules, he should have got a win over Tank. Okay, simple. There's nothing to argue there. Just like Lamont Roach last night, even though that shit looked weird to me, his glove touched the ground, so it was called a knockdown, rightfully so. But when Lamont fought Gervonta Davis to a draw, most fans dismissed the fight as Tank having an off night. People said Tank looked flat, unfocused, or simply not himself. He was even in the corner arguing with his coach. Tank just seemed to be all over the place. Many believe Tank overlooked Roach, and others argue that Roach didn't belong in the ring with him in the first place. But now, after Roach's performance last night, fans are realizing that they underestimated Roach. They're seeing that Roach has a high boxing IQ, tight fundamentals, timing, can counterpunch, got a chin on him, and got the kind of composure that could give any top fighter trouble. Roach didn't magically develop those qualities overnight. They were always there. It's just that fans refuse to acknowledge them until now. And that reflection is forcing people to revisit the Tank fight with new eyes. Now they're saying to themselves, okay, this is why Tank looked the way he did. Yeah, Tank didn't really look like himself, but he was in there with a problem. He was in there with a problem in Lamont Roach. So the fact that Lamont Roach and the way fans view him has been elevated. Gervonta Davis and the way fans are viewing him is being elevated right now with new eyes. Then you got Pitbull Cruz, a fan favorite. When Tank beat Cruz, he was criticized more than he was praised. Fans said he struggled, he barely won. A lot of people said Cruz deserved to win. Frank said he had a messed up, I think it was left hand or right hand. One of his hands was messed up. People refuse to give Tank credit for boxing smart, adjusting mid-fight, and neutralizing Cruz's pressure. Instead, they use the fight as ammunition to downgrade Tank's skill set. But you look now, because they weren't really giving him a lot of credit for the Cruz win. Most people, some of us did. But you look at the way Cruz performed last night, showing that power, dropping Roach, just defensive improvements, not being as chaotic as we used to seeing, actually trying to get up on his toes and box. He showed a more mature style, and fans are realizing that Tank, he wasn't struggling against Cruz. He was solving a puzzle in real time. Pitbull looked like a monster last night in spots. And it's reminding fans that Tank handled that same monster with one good hand and still outboxed him. That realization is hitting a lot of fans very, very hard today. And it should. It should. But I tell you, the one fighter last night who showed up and showed out, Frank Martin. The third piece of the puzzle. When he fought Tank, fans accused Tank of cherry picking yet again. The narrative was that Tank avoided top competition to pick Martin because he was unproven. No one gave Martin a chance, but I tell you what, Martin handled his business against Tank till he got caught. And last night, Martin's opponent didn't get a chance to handle his business because Martin hit him with the bing bing and tranquilized him. But fans right now looking at Frank Martin, they're saying he's a legitimate elite level contender. His timing, his footwork, his accuracy, his combinations, the way he went to the body, then came and doubled up the jab, stepped to his right, then shot the left hand straight down the pipe. They're saying, man, Martin is that guy. But the bottom line is Martin has always been that guy. He was a high-risk fighter before people started to understand, based on last night's performance, what Martin brings to the table. But the bottom line is now that Martin has proven himself, Tank's win over him looks far more impressive in hindsight. It's just sad how some boxing fans can be, but they got one guy on Twitter. He's a fucking idiot. I ain't gonna get into who he is and all that, but there's a guy on Twitter who's, no kidding, a fucking clown. He's an embarrassment to himself, to his family, and I don't understand how someone can conduct themselves that way. They have the whole boxing community from boxing casuals to diehard boxing fans to professional boxers know who this individual is and just fucking have no respect for him. But hey, if you're making good money, just stirring the pot, then you gotta do what you gotta do. But I think all of this leads to a larger story of Gervonta Davis. His entire career, the criticism he's always received about his resume. For years, boxing fans accused Tank of, wanting to hand-picked opponents, avoiding the real challenges, of going after the killers at 135, trying to unify, become undisputed. They're like Tank putting duck sauce under fried rice, and some people thought he did it because he was afraid he would lose. They say he just wants to play it safe, rob the bank, retire, and he doesn't care about his legacy or proving his greatness. But I think as time continues to pass, more and more of Tank's opponents are proving themselves to be elite, durable, world-class fighters, man. The same fighters people dismissed are now thriving. The same opponents fans said didn't count are becoming champions, contenders, legitimate threats to anyone in their division. And now fans are reevaluating Tank's resume and realizing that they may have judged him, harshly for too long. But here's a twist and the emotional core to the story, right? Tank doesn't even want the credit anymore. Tank cussed that dude out on Twitter. He feels that fans disrespected him for years. They don't understand what the fighters go through. They just get on there on Twitter and just start to disrespect. They doubted his entire resume, discredited every win, called him protected, and refused to appreciate the subtleties of his skill set. And that's true to a certain extent. Now that his former opponents are shining, because last night was really the Frank Martin, Lamont Roach, and Pitbull Cruz show. You know what I'm saying? All three former opponents of Tank. But the same fans who dismissed him are trying to circle back and give him respect. But you look at Tank in his recent comments, he don't care about seeking approval from nobody. You can see that Tank just wants a peace of mind, man. He just wants to be in a mentally he wants to be mentally healthy and in a healthy mental space. He don't want no bullshit. He definitely doesn't want validation from fans who only understood his greatness after the fact. He feels that they couldn't recognize his talent in real time, then their respect is too late, too empty now. So Tank is out here like hood champion talking about, hey, yo, hold your horses and stop taking it to the stupid. And, that creates a unique dynamic because without the fans, these boxers, men and women, are nobody. Fans are finally ready to celebrate Tank, but Tank is emotionally checked out from the court of public opinion. And I don't blame him, to be honest with you. I do my little videos and I talk about everybody, and it's like 90% of the time, man. Well, 100% of the time, I'm going to have humor. I'm always joking, but I don't really dig in on anybody unless there's a reason. Some people say, you go too hard on Clarissa Shields. I don't disrespect Clarissa. I just talk about the things I disagree because she gives so much content. But the bottom line is what some of these fans out here, they're ridiculous, man. And Tank isn't trying to please these critics. He's no longer trying to prove anything. Gervonta seems to be the kind of guy right now. He just believes his work speaks for itself. And after last night, fans are starting to agree. Kind of like that guy who was married and didn't appreciate his wife. And she took care of the kids, cooked and cleaned, put her career on hold, made sure that he was going to be okay. He was successful. And he didn't show any appreciation. Then they divorced, and then his ass realized he messed up. And now that the kids are older, she decides, okay, I took care of these babies. Now they can handle themselves. I'm going to go and do my thing. And now she's blowing up. And he's sitting back looking, saying, damn, I should have probably showed her more support. Too late. Too late, man. Now you got the fans out here begging him to return to the ring because they want to see greatness while it's still here. Tank is not motivated by their applause. He's motivated only by legacy, business, and personal decisions. And speaking of that, Tank is saying next year is Pitbull Cruz who he wants to fight. He ain't even mentioned Lamont Roach, but it sounds like next year could be Pitbull Cruz in the rematch. And that makes sense because that's what it's going to be a whole lot of money because Pitbull Cruz has a whole country behind him. But in Tank's mind, the fans ruined their own trustworthiness by only giving him credit when it was convenient. So, it is what it is. But I do think last night changed the narrative around Tank Davis, reminding people that time is the greatest judge in boxing. Many fighters aren't appreciated until their opponents blossom. Many champions aren't respected until years later. And you know what? When it comes to these fan bases, I don't think they really realize the greatness they're witnessing until it's almost too late. For the first time in years, fans are demanding Tank Davis return, not because of hype, but because of clarity. It's like now they understand. They finally see the level he was operating at all along. They want to see him back in the ring because they now understand how special he is. But I'm gonna tell you right now, Tank doesn't fight for validation, and that's the story. Fans want Tank now more than ever, but Tank wants nothing from them. So my question to you is, do you blame him? Keep cool, I'm in the break.